September 17, 1952. Harlem, New York, a small club called the Blue Room. Capacity 50 people. That evening, there were no reservations because nobody knew about this concert. 5 young musicians called the Uptown Five were about to perform their first show, their first serious concert. But it almost didn't happen. Why? No money. Equipment rental hadn't been paid, stage setup was incomplete, microphone system was missing. The band members sat outside the club entrance, heads in their hands, wondering what to do. Just then, someone entered through the back door, wearing a hat, glasses, ordinary looking. Nobody paid attention. The man walked to the back of the room, sat at a corner table, stayed in the shadows. Nobody recognized him because Louis Armstrong hadn't come to be recognized. He'd come to help. A few days earlier, he'd heard about a young band that might have to cancel their concert because of money problems. Louis had quietly shown up, sat down, he would watch, and then he would do what he always did because Louis Armstrong understood that music wasn't just notes, it was hope. That evening, 5 young musicians would find hope, but they didn't know it yet. They didn't know how lucky they were because sitting in the back, in the shadows, was a legend, and that legend was about to change their lives. Before we dive into this beautiful story, please take a moment to subscribe to our channel and hit that notification bell. What you're about to witness is one of the most heartwarming examples of Louis Armstrong's incredible generosity and how one act of kindness can transform lives forever. The information in this video is compiled from documented interviews, archival news, books, and historical reports. For narrative purposes, some parts are dramatized and may not represent 100% factual accuracy. We also use AI-assisted visuals and AI narration for cinematic reconstruction. The use of AI does not mean the story is fake. It is a storytelling tool. Our goal is to recreate the spirit of that era as faithfully as possible. Enjoy watching. To understand what happened that September evening in Harlem, we need to go back several weeks. We need to understand what Louis Armstrong was experiencing in the late summer of 1952. Because what Louis did for the Uptown Five wasn't random. It was part of who Louis was. Part of a lifetime spent remembering where he came from and helping others who reminded him of himself. August 25, 1952. Louis Armstrong sat in his dressing room at the Apollo Theater. He'd just finished a sold-out performance. The crowd had been ecstatic, standing ovation, encore after encore. At 51 years old, Louis was at the peak of his fame. His all-stars band was touring internationally. His records were selling. He was one of the most recognizable people in America. But success hadn't made Louis forget, hadn't made him comfortable, hadn't made him stop worrying, because in 1952 Louis was facing pressures that went beyond music. The civil rights movement was intensifying. Black Americans were demanding equality, fighting segregation, challenging racist laws. And some people expected Louis to be more vocal, more political, more militant. Young black musicians criticized Louis, called him too accommodating to white audiences, said he smiled too much, played for segregated crowds without protest, didn't use his platform to fight racism aggressively enough. These criticisms hurt Louis, because Louis had fought racism his entire life, just differently, through excellence, through being so undeniably talented that people had to respect him, through opening doors for other black musicians, but the younger generation didn't always see it that way. That August evening at the Apollo, after the crowd had left, Louis sat alone thinking about these things, about his responsibility, about his legacy, about what really mattered. His manager, Joe Glazer, knocked on the door. "Louis, great show tonight. The promoter wants to book you for another week." Louis nodded absently. Joe noticed his mood. "What's on your mind, Pops?" Louis looked at him. "Joe, you ever wonder if we're doing enough for the young cats coming up?" Joe sat down. "You do plenty, Louis. You give young musicians opportunities. You mentor them. Louis interrupted. "But is it enough? These kids today, they're fighting for something, fighting for respect, for equality, and I'm just playing my horn." Joe shook his head. "Louis, you've done more for racial equality through your music than most politicians do with their speeches. You've shown the world that a black man from the poorest neighborhood in New Orleans can become internationally famous through pure talent." Louis smiled sadly. "Maybe. But sometimes I feel like I should be doing more." That conversation stayed with Louis over the following weeks. He started thinking about concrete ways he could help, not just through music, but through direct action, through using his success to create opportunities for others. September 5th, 1952. Louis was having lunch at a small restaurant in Harlem when he overheard a conversation at the next table. Two young men talking. "Man, I don't know what we're going to do. The concert's in 2 weeks and we still don't have the money for equipment rental." "Did you ask the club owner for an advance?" "He says he can't. Says we're unknown. Too risky." "What about borrowing equipment?" "From who? Everybody wants money up front." Louis listened quietly. Didn't turn around, didn't interrupt, just listened. The conversation continued. Details emerged. A band called the Uptown Five. 5 young musicians, all from Harlem. All talented but struggling. They'd booked the Blue Room for their first real concert but couldn't afford the equipment rental. The club required a deposit for stage setup. They didn't have it. Louis finished his lunch, paid his bill, left. But the conversation stayed with him. That evening, he made some calls, found out more about the Uptown Five. They were legitimate, real musicians, not scammers, just young guys trying to get a start, and exactly like Louis had been 30 years earlier. September 8th, 1952. Louis called the owner of the Blue Room, a man named Chester who Louis knew from the old days. "Chester, it's Louis Armstrong." Chester was surprised. "Pops, what can I do for you?" Louis got straight to the point. "You got a band called the Uptown Five booked for September 17th? "Yeah, why?" "They having money troubles?" Chester sighed. "Yeah, good kids, talented, but broke. Probably going to have to cancel." Louis made his proposal. "Don't cancel. I'll cover the equipment rental and stage setup, but anonymous. Don't tell them who paid." Chester was shocked. "Louis, that's over $200. Louis laughed. "I know what it costs. Can you do it or not?" Chester agreed immediately. "Of course. But Louis, why anonymous?" Louis's answer was simple. "Because if they know it's me, they'll feel like they owe me. And I don't want them feeling obligated. I just want them to have their shot, like somebody gave me mine." Chester promised to keep Louis's identity secret, would tell the band a generous donor had covered the costs, wanted to remain anonymous. September 17th arrived, the day of the concert. That morning, the Uptown Five received incredible news. Chester called their band leader, Jerome, a 22-year-old pianist. "Jerome, good news. A donor has covered your equipment and stage costs. You're all set for tonight." Jerome couldn't believe it. "Who? Who paid?" Chester kept his promise. "Anonymous donor. Just wants to help young musicians. Said you should focus on playing great music." Jerome gathered the band, told them they were stunned, grateful, confused, but mostly excited. After weeks of stress and worry, they could actually perform. They spent the day preparing, rehearsing, getting their suits cleaned, making sure their instruments were ready. At 6 in the evening, they arrived at the Blue Room to set up. The equipment was there. Microphones, amplifiers, drum kit, everything they needed. Jerome the pianist stood on that small stage and felt tears in his eyes. "Somebody believed in us," he said to the others. "Somebody we don't even know believed in us enough to pay for this." Marcus, the 18-year-old trumpet player, nodded. "Then we better make sure we earn it. Let's play the best concert of our lives." At 7:30, Louis Armstrong arrived at the Blue Room through the back entrance. He wore a hat pulled low. Sunglasses even though it was evening. A simple jacket. Nothing that would draw attention. Chester saw him come in. "Louis, you came." Louis smiled. "Wouldn't miss it. Where should I sit?" Chester led him to a back corner table, partially hidden by a support column. "Here. You can see the stage, but most people won't notice you." Louis sat down, ordered a drink, and waited. At 8 o'clock, people started arriving. Not many, maybe 30 people. Friends of the band, family members, a few curious jazz fans. The Blue Room wasn't advertising this concert heavily. The Uptown Five were unknown. But those 30 people who showed up were there because they believed in these young musicians. At 9 o'clock, the lights dimmed. The 5 young men walked onto the stage, and you could see their nervousness, their excitement, their hope. Jerome sat at the piano. Marcus stood with his trumpet. Andre held his saxophone. Isaiah gripped his upright bass. Deshaun sat behind the drums. They looked at each other, nodded, and began to play. From the first notes, Louis knew. These kids had talent, real talent. They weren't polished yet, weren't perfect. But they had something you couldn't teach. Soul, passion, genuine love for the music. Louis sat in his corner, hidden, listening, And he smiled, that genuine Louis Armstrong smile. Not for cameras, not for audiences, just pure joy at hearing young musicians play with heart. Have you ever received help from an unexpected source when you needed it most? Share your story in the comments. The Uptown Five played for 45 minutes, a mix of jazz standards and original compositions. Their playing improved as they relaxed, as they realized the audience was with them, encouraging them. The 30 people in that small club clapped enthusiastically, called out encouragement. Yeah, play it. Beautiful. Jerome's mother sat in the front row, tears streaming down her face. Her son was living his dream right there on that stage. Marcus's father, a subway worker who doubted his son's choice to pursue music, sat in the back. And despite his doubts, despite his fears for Marcus's future, he felt pride, pure pride, watching his son command that stage, play that trumpet with such confidence and skill. After 45 minutes, the band took a break. They walked off stage sweating, energized, happy. They huddled backstage. That was incredible. Did you hear them clapping? We did it. We actually did it. But they didn't know the best part was yet to come. During the break, Louis got up from his table, walked backstage, found Chester. Chester, can I talk to the boys? Chester grinned. You gonna reveal yourself? Louis nodded. Time for a surprise. Chester gathered the band. Guys, somebody wants to meet you. The 5 young musicians came out to the hallway behind the stage. Curious, confused. And then they saw him, Louis Armstrong. Standing there, smiling. They froze, couldn't speak, couldn't move. Jerome finally found his voice. Mr. Armstrong, Louis extended his hand. Call me Louis. You boys sound great out there. They shook his hand one by one, still in shock. Marcus stammered. What are you doing here? Louis smiled. Came to hear some good music, and I heard it. Andre, the saxophone player, asked the question they were all thinking. Were you the one who paid for our equipment? Louis's smile widened. Guilty. But I didn't do it for thanks. I did it because 30 years ago somebody gave me a chance. And I never forgot it. Now I try to give chances to other musicians when I can. The young men didn't know what to say. This legend, this icon, had paid for their concert, had come to hear them play. Jerome spoke for all of them. Thank you. You don't know what this means. Louis put a hand on Jerome's shoulder. I know exactly what it means, because I've been where you are, talented but broke, wanting a chance but nobody giving it. So I'm giving you yours. Then Louis asked a question that made their hearts stop. How much more music you got planned for tonight? Jerome answered. Another 45-minute set. Louis grinned. Mind if I join you for a few songs? The silence was deafening. Then Marcus spoke. Are you serious? Louis laughed. Dead serious. I brought my horn. It's in the car. Let me grab it and we'll make some music together. 10 minutes later, the audience in the Blue Room saw something they'd never forget. The 5 young musicians returned to the stage, and with them, Louis Armstrong. The crowd went wild. That's Satchmo! Louis Armstrong! Oh my God! Louis raised his hand for quiet. Ladies and gentlemen, I came here tonight just to listen. But these young men are so talented I couldn't resist asking if I could sit in. Hope you don't mind. The crowd's response left no doubt. They absolutely didn't mind. Louis turned to the band. What should we play? Jerome, hands shaking, suggested, When the Saints Go Marching In. Louis nodded. Classic choice. Let's do it. What happened next was pure magic. Louis Armstrong and the Uptown Five playing together. The young musicians were nervous at first, playing alongside their idol. But Louis made them comfortable, gave them space, encouraged them with nods and smiles. Marcus, the young trumpet player, got to trade solos with Louis Armstrong. Louis would play a phrase, Marcus would answer, back and forth, teacher and student, legend and newcomer. The audience was mesmerized. This wasn't just a concert, it was a moment, a once-in-a-lifetime moment. They played 3 songs together, When the Saints Go Marching In. Basin Street Blues, and What a Wonderful World, which Louis had recorded a few years earlier, but wasn't yet the massive hit it would later become. Please subscribe if this story is inspiring you. What happens after this concert will show you the true depth of Louis Armstrong's generosity and heart. When they finished the 3rd song, the audience gave a standing ovation that lasted 5 full minutes. Louis stood with the young musicians, put his arms around Jerome and Marcus, and the photographer who'd come to document the Uptown Five's first concert captured that image. 6 musicians on stage, 5 young, 1 legendary, all smiling, all equal in that moment. After the concert ended, after the audience had left still buzzing about what they'd witnessed, Louis sat with the Uptown Five in the empty club. "You boys got real talent. What's your plan?" Jerome explained. "We want a tour, build a following, maybe record someday, but we don't have transportation, can't afford to rent a van, can't afford our own equipment, it's hard." Louis listened, nodded. "I'm going to help you with that. But first, I need to know you're serious. This isn't a hobby for you, right? This is your life." All 5 answered immediately. "Yes, absolutely. Music is everything to us." Louis smiled. "Good, because I don't invest in hobbies, I invest in careers. Here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to buy you equipment, real equipment, microphones, amplifiers, instruments if you need them, and I'm going to buy you a van so you can transport it all and go play wherever you get booked." The young men sat in stunned silence. This was beyond anything they'd imagined. Marcus spoke. "Mr. Armstrong, that's too much. We can't accept—" Louis interrupted gently. "Yes, you can. And you will. Because this isn't charity. It's an investment. I'm investing in your future, in jazz's future. And someday, when you're successful and you meet young musicians struggling like you are now, you'll help them. That's how it works. We help each other." Jerome asked. "Why us?" "Why are you doing this for us?" Louis' answer was simple and profound. "Because somebody did it for me. King Oliver gave me my first real chance, brought me to Chicago, taught me, believed in me. I never forgot. And when I became successful, I promised myself I'd do the same for others. You boys are talented. You work hard. You deserve a shot. I'm giving it to you." September 25th, 1952. 8 days after the concert, Louis took the Uptown Five shopping. To a music store he knew in Manhattan, told them to pick out what they needed. Jerome chose a better piano. Marcus got a new trumpet. Andre upgraded his saxophone. Isaiah found a quality upright bass. Deshaun picked out a professional drum kit. The total came to over $1,500. Louis paid without blinking. Then they went to a car dealership. Louis bought them a used but reliable van, big enough to fit 5 people and all their equipment. Cost another $800, over $2,000 total. In 1952, that was a fortune, the equivalent of buying someone a house. The young men kept trying to thank Louis. He kept waving it off. "Don't thank me. Just play great music. That's all the thanks I need." But before they parted ways, Louis gave them one more gift, advice. "Boys, listen, you're talented. You got heart. You got the equipment now. But that's not enough. You need 3 more things. 1, humility. No matter how good you get, stay humble. The moment you think you're too good is the moment you stop growing. 2, respect the music. Jazz isn't just entertainment, it's art. It's culture. It's the story of our people. Treat it with respect. And 3, help others. When you make it, and I believe you will, don't forget where you came from. Help the next generation like I'm helping you." The Uptown Five took those words to heart, wrote them down, lived by them. Over the following months and years, they toured throughout New York, then the East Coast, building a following, getting better. In 1954, they recorded their first album, dedicated it to Louis Armstrong, to Pops, who believed in us when nobody else did. The album sold modestly, got good reviews. Established the Uptown Five as a legitimate jazz act. By 1956, they were touring nationally, playing major jazz festivals, sharing stages with established acts, and they never forgot Louis's third piece of advice: help others. Whenever they encountered young, struggling musicians, they helped, gave advice, shared contacts, sometimes loaned equipment or money, paid forward what Louis had given them. In 1958, Jerome got a call. A young piano player in Philadelphia was struggling, talented but broke, needed help. Jerome drove to Philadelphia, met with the young man, gave him money for equipment, helped him get gigs. When the young man asked why, Jerome told him about Louis Armstrong, about September 17th, 1952, about how Louis had changed their lives. "Now I'm doing for you what Louis did for us, and someday you'll do it for someone else. That's how we take care of each other." Louis Armstrong continued his career, touring the world, recording albums, becoming even more famous, but But he never stopped helping young musicians. It wasn't publicized, wasn't advertised. Louis didn't do it for recognition. The Uptown Five weren't the only band he helped. There were others, dozens of others. Young singers he paid for voice lessons, trumpet players he bought instruments for, entire bands he helped with equipment or tour costs. Some of these musicians became famous, many didn't, but all of them remembered Louis Armstrong's kindness. In 1965, the Uptown Five had their biggest hit, a song called September Song. It reached the top 10 on the jazz charts. When interviewers asked about the title's significance, Jerome always told the story about September 17th, 1952, about Louis Armstrong showing up to their first concert, about his generosity, about how he'd changed their lives. That September night, Jerome would say, Louis Armstrong taught us that success isn't about what you achieve, it's about what you give. He didn't have to help us. We were nobody, but he saw something in us, believed in us, and gave us the tools to succeed. That's the kind of person Louis Armstrong was, not just the greatest trumpet player who ever lived, but one of the most generous human beings. When Louis Armstrong passed away in July 1971, the Big Uptown Five attended his funeral. They were in their 40s now, established musicians, but they came to pay respects to the man who'd made it all possible. At the funeral, Jerome spoke briefly. Louis Armstrong gave us more than equipment and a van. He gave us belief in ourselves, belief in our music, belief that if we worked hard and stayed humble, we could make it. Every success we've had, we owe to him. Not because of the money he spent, but because he saw us when we were invisible, believed in us when we had nothing. That's what Louis did. He made people feel seen, feel valued, feel possible. After the funeral, the Uptown Five established a scholarship fund in Louis Armstrong's name for young jazz musicians who showed talent but lacked resources. They funded it with money from their own concerts. Every year, the scholarship helped several young musicians, bought them instruments, paid for lessons, covered recording costs. The application asked one question: if you receive this scholarship, will you commit to helping other young musicians when you're able? Every recipient said yes, and most of them kept that promise, creating a chain of generosity that continued long after Louis Armstrong was gone. Today, in 2025, that scholarship fund still exists, has helped over 500 young musicians in the 70 years since Louis Armstrong helped the Uptown Five. Some of those musicians became famous, most didn't, but all of them learned the lesson Louis taught. That success means nothing if you don't use it to help others. That talent without generosity is incomplete. That the greatest gift you can give is opportunity. The Blue Room Club in Harlem closed in 1978, but before it did, the owner Chester installed a plaque. It read, "On this stage, September 17, 1952, Louis Armstrong performed with the Uptown Five, five unknown young musicians he'd helped when they had nothing. This act of generosity represents the true spirit of jazz, where legends lift up newcomers and everyone takes care of each other." That plaque was saved when the building was demolished. Today it hangs in the National Museum of African American History and Culture in Washington, D.C. Thousands of visitors see it every year, read the story behind it, and learn about Louis Armstrong's quiet generosity. The van Louis bought the Uptown Five lasted until 1963. 11 years. During those years, it traveled over 200,000 miles, carried the band and their equipment to hundreds of concerts across America. When it finally died, the Uptown Five didn't throw it away. They donated it to a museum, along with a letter explaining its significance. This van represents more than transportation. It represents Louis Armstrong's belief in us, his willingness to invest in unknown musicians, his understanding that sometimes all talent needs is a chance and the tools to succeed. This van gave us both. Marcus, the young trumpet player who'd played alongside Louis that September night, went on to teach music, spent 40 years as a high school band director in Harlem, taught hundreds of students. When parents complained their children couldn't afford instruments, Marcus found ways, applied for grants, organized fundraisers, sometimes bought instruments himself. Louis Armstrong taught me, he'd tell people, that if you have the ability to help, you have the responsibility to help. I'm just doing what he did for me. The story of September 17, 1952 became legendary in jazz circles. Older musicians told younger ones. You know about the time Pops crashed the Uptown Five's first concert? bought them a whole van full of equipment, changed their entire lives in one night, and the younger musicians would listen, amazed, inspired, understanding that jazz wasn't just music, it was community, it was family. It was legendary figures helping unknown newcomers, creating a chain of generosity that stretched across generations. September 17th, 1952, a date that meant nothing to most of the world. But to 5 young musicians, it meant everything. The night their dreams became possible. The night a legend walked through the back door of a small Harlem club and changed their lives forever. Not with grand gestures or public announcements, but with quiet generosity, with belief, with the willingness to see talent in obscurity and give it opportunity. That's Louis Armstrong's true legacy. Not the records, though they're magnificent. Not the performances, though they're legendary. But the lives he touched, the musicians he helped, the chain of generosity he started, the reminder that greatness isn't just about personal achievement. It's about lifting others. Tonight, somewhere, a young musician is struggling, talented but broke, dreaming but doubting, needing just one person to believe in them, to give them a chance. The story of Louis Armstrong and the Uptown Five reminds us all. Be that person. See the talent in obscurity. Believe in people when they can't believe in themselves. Give opportunities to those who deserve them but can't access them. Because you never know. That struggling young musician might be the next great artist, and even if they're not, even if they never become famous, you'll have changed their life, given them hope, shown them that someone cares. That's what Louis Armstrong did on September 17, 1952. Showed 5 young musicians that someone cared, that their dreams mattered, that they deserved a chance. And in doing so, he didn't just change 5 lives. He started a ripple effect that's still spreading 70 years later. 5 musicians helped others, who helped others, who helped others. Hundreds of lives changed, thousands of moments of generosity, all traced back to one September night when Louis Armstrong walked through a back door and decided to help. The lights in the Blue Room have been dark for decades. The building is gone, but the spirit of that night lives on in every musician who helps another, in every established artist who remembers struggling and gives back, in every act of generosity that asks nothing in return except that the recipient pay it forward. That's jazz. That's community. That's Louis Armstrong's legacy. Not the notes he played, beautiful as they were, but the lives he touched, the chain he started, the reminder that we're all connected, that success means nothing unless we share it, that the greatest gift isn't talent, it's generosity. Thank you, Louis Armstrong, for the music, for the kindness, for showing us that legends aren't just made by what they achieve, but by who they help along the way. The van is in a museum. The plaque is in Washington, the recordings are archived, but the real legacy is in the hearts of every musician who remembers that night. Who tells the story? Who pays it forward? Who understands that September 17, 1952 wasn't just a concert? It was a promise that talent deserves opportunity, that struggling deserves support, that dreams deserve chances. Louis Armstrong kept that promise his entire life and inspired others to keep it too, forever.